Welcome to Behind the Podcast Mic, the podcast for podcasters and those ready to hit record for the first time. Join your host, Emmanuel Rose, for a show that's your go-to resource for everything podcasting. In each episode, we'll pull back the curtain on what makes podcasting such a powerful tool for connection, authority, and growth. Whether you're just starting out or looking to sharpen your skills, this show will guide you through the art and strategy of building a podcast that stands out. We'll dive into solo insights, guest interviews, and real-world best practices, all designed to help you master the mic. Behind the Mic is sponsored by Fluent Frame, a creative partner that transforms your ideas into polished episodes and lasting digital assets. So tune in and learn how podcasting can grow your audience, expand your network, and position you as a thought leader in your field. Let's step behind the mic.
Welcome to this episode of Behind the Podcast Mic. Today, we are going to dig into a creator and a process of taking something that you're passionate about and that you believe is important for the world and how to turn that into a podcast, how to monetize it bit by bit, and how to get started and begin to build an audience and then keep it going. And my guest today is Tommy Serafinski, and his podcast is about the outdoors, Tommy's Outdoors. And he talks and writes about the natural environment, biodiversity, conservation, hunting, fishing, rewilding, and more. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Emmanuel, hey, how are you? It's pleasure to be on your show again.
Well,
it's a different show, but I'm really glad to be here.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm very grateful for your time and your willingness to get on and talk a little bit about podcast process and what podcasting has meant for you and for the work that you're doing on behalf of wild things and wild places, and a little bit about how you do what you do. So we'll wander around all kinds of spots.
Sure, no problem.
Well, first, I'm just interested to know how you conceived of your podcast idea, and then about how long it took you to get your first guest, and what kind of got you started.
Yeah. So this is a podcast about podcasts. So in the interest of original programming, I go a little bit, even earlier from the start. So part that people who know me probably already heard is that I had a blog about fishing, and that blog was in Polish language. I'm originally from Poland, and I was writing about my fishing adventures. And then about 10 years later into blogging, and these were the old days of blogs where organic growth was a thing back in the day. So for example, 10 years later I moved to Ireland, right? And I was then writing about fishing in Ireland. So that exploded because a lot of people were moving from Poland to Ireland, and they were interested, how's the fishing in there. And on the side of the organic growth was like it was a time when in Google you put like a River Shannon. My blog was on number one on Google, and I didn't do anything. I was just like, oh, look at that, it's number one on Google, right? It's like this is not happening today. So anyway, I was writing, but I never wanted to write that blog in a sense of like, oh, I was at the same spot, I was fishing for the same fish, which most of the fishing is. So over time, it was like less posts going on. And at the same time, I was thinking like, what? I'm in Ireland. I have, my new colleagues, new friends, and speaking English language. I would like to do something in English language. And obviously, being foreign national, it's much harder to write in foreign language than speak. Sure. And so the podcast was a natural fit. And that's how I started podcasting. And that extra bit is that, the first thing that I did, like not many people know, I started podcast in Polish. That it wasn't even like any specific topic. It was just a conversation about everything. But the purpose was to learn how to do the podcast, just to figure out the microphones, the programs, the software, the uploads, the distribution. And mind you, that was year 2015.
Okay.
So
That's a long time ago.
yeah, there was no like one-click distribution to all the platforms. Like that didn't exist, right? You need to send an email to Apple and send an email to this and that and like do all those things, right? So that podcast ran for about 20 episodes, and then I shut it down, but that was sort of by design. And in the meantime, I started with the podcast that was originally called Tommy's Outdoors. And then after a while, it was changed. The name was changed to Conservation and Science, to sort of like more reflect what I do and reflect, topics that I discuss, because I thought, like, it's not about Tommy, it's not about outdoors. It's more focused on the conservation and science, and discussions with scientists and with practical conservationists and so on. So that was my route through blogging. And I ended up podcasting for started this podcast, Conservation Science, started in 2016, so it's going to be 10 years next year.
Wow. And then how many episodes have you done up to this point on?
I'm at the moment 209 is already scheduled, and I'm working on 210.
All right. Well, that's quite a lot of episodes. Number one, right? We know most podcasts don't make it past 10. So
it used to be past 20, like that. Once you hit 21, then you're good.
Yeah.
But now it's just like the bar.
There's more players now. Yeah. Well, how did you, I guess, conceive? I mean, yeah. So you wanted to have something in English, something around what you were passionate about. I guess what's the concept of the show now? Is it science based or is it experience based? What do you got?
Yeah, so look, like I said, the title was Tommy's Outdoors, because I thought I'm just gonna be talking with my buddies when we go fishing and like stuff like that. And probably if someone dares to go to episode 1, 2, 3, and 4, right, they're gonna find something like that. By the way, folks, I don't want you to listen to those episodes, right? They're still there, but don't. It's not gonna be good experience, I guess. But I was doing these things, and also I was like a kind of like active on social media, which also was not back then what it is right now. And I get into conversation with about tagging fish, tagging sharks, and tagging rays with one of the officers of the Irish Wildlife Trust, and he was very against tagging fish. It's like, oh, leave that fish alone, and so on and so forth, right? And so we got in this discussion, because then on the other hand, I was like for many years taking part in the shark tagging program and so on. And I noticed there was at the time it was called Sea Monitor. There was a Twitter account on Sea Monitor, and they were doing this program. Among these programs that Sea Monitor does, they do fish tagging, right? And then I started talking with them. It's like, hey, what do you think about tagging fish? Is it useless and pointless? Is it good? Is it bad? Whatever. And then I said, do you want to be on the show and talk about it? And they say, yeah, sure, right? And that was episode probably 60, maybe 50, maybe 70. Okay. I don't know. Like, so, it was still called Tommy's Outdoors, right? And so we had that episode. And once we finished recording the episode, the scientific manager of a program said, like, hey, like we actually have a lot of more these work packages and scientists. Would you like to do this? And I said, like, yeah, sure. So I started recording the episode with the scientists from that program. And lo and behold, I started getting emails from other scientific programs like, hey, we heard that you're doing this podcast for these guys. We also have all these scientists here that like, and so and at the same time there was like a very positive response from my audience who are looking for, so like in this case of fish tagging, they kind of feel that something is right or can be right, but they can't quite put a finger on it. And then so that was very useful for them to hear like a proper scientist with the published papers and everything that go, hey, this is what it is, this is how it works. So and over time this is how it started, how I started rolling. And then I said, like, hey, like, this is not about Tommy anymore.
Right.
And this is not about just like outdoors. It is more of a conservation and science, which really, when you think about it, my adventure in the outdoors was sort of about science, and sort of like, like first time I went fishing, my first thought was like, how does it happen that we still have a fish in this river? Like
Right.
not all people just like caught all the fish, right? And
Right.
it felt silly, but now I know it's not actually silly. That's actually a problem, and there are programs around that. There's regulations around that precisely to avoid this thing. So that's how that transformation happened from like Tommy's Outdoors and hey, let's go fishing into conservation and science, where I talk with the scientists, where I talk about, like I said, practical conservationists, because not everything that is going on in conservation has to be science, and also likewise, not all scientific endeavors and not all scientific research actually is conservation, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It depends who's funding the study.
As well, yeah, that's a big part of that. That's a big part of that.
Well, I love it. What I love that story because you started out with one concept and then you've let it grow and breathe and change over time instead of being locked into what you started with. So that's really cool how you've let it get its own life really as a podcast, right? I'm curious a little bit about under the hood. Like what kind of equipment did you start with versus what kind of equipment you have now, and how rigorous should people be about having to have the best stuff in order to kick off episode 1 through 10?
Yeah, well, the microphone that you see here, I bought it for like 20 euro, or just like and I have it, and I bought it like 10 years ago. I still have it, right? So that should tell you, and the reality is, like, right now, with all the AI tools that are doing just the miraculous things with audio, right? I used to sit long hours in front of Adobe Audition and moving sliders and trying to remove echo in the room and like manipulate reverb, and now you have all those tools like
Magic.
Adobe Podcast, or literally everything does it. The Descript does it, Riverside does it. Like literally every recording platform has like a Magic Dust or whatever the brand name that does stuff, right? So I think that the much more important is the room that you're sitting in. And just by the way, folks, you can see I'm just in my new studio, so I'm just like putting these stuff on the walls, and like this it's not there yet. It's not there yet. So unless you do some processing, Emmanuel, you might see a little bit of reverb in that room. So
that's okay.
That room is way more important than your microphone. So especially when you're starting, like there is this balance, right? Because like on the other hand, sometimes, and there's like a known in psychology that if you buy some nice gear and you spend some money on it, you feel like now you have to do it. Like it motivates you, and you have a pleasure of using good equipment, and you have this thing going on like, I bought it, I invested in it, now I gonna do it, right? So there is this aspect of it.
Sure.
But if you don't need to, mind control yourself into this, or just you're on a tight budget, it really doesn't matter. And actually, on the MacBook Pros, for the M1, M2 MacBooks, the people were not talking about this. Like the microphone in those MacBooks is a kick-ass microphone.
Nice.
Use that, right? Like it really doesn't matter, because like you said, really the first 10 episodes, first 20 episodes is probably going to be throwaway if you right. So I'm talking about the indie podcaster who does this in a studio, right? And I just want to say here, like throw in a little bit like thing that you hear all those podcast gurus who say like, oh, you need to this and monetize it like this, like, and there's two different things, right? If you approaching the podcast as a business, you treat it like a business. And then, yes, you need professional equipment, professional room. You probably need the editors, you need the script writers, you approaching this as a business. And that's a different story. If you're approaching this thing as someone who's, like finished your work and then you're going to do the podcast because you love it, that's a different story.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to talk about this later. So just for this purpose, if you're indie podcaster, you're not intending to make money and get rich by podcasting, but something drives you, you're having like your creative need, start doing the goddamn podcast first. And once you get going, then you're gonna find out what is the piece of equipment that holds you back the most. And I'm willing to bet it's not gonna be the microphone. It's gonna be something else, probably.
Well, I agree with you. Anyone's listening, if you have not started your podcast yet, cancel the rest of your meetings for the day and get your first 3 episodes recorded. That's how important this is. For me, it has changed the way I can interact with people. I mean, I meet amazing people from all over the world, from unique backgrounds. I also have got more content for content marketing than I'll ever be able to use in my entire life. And I learn every time I'm either on as a guest or that I'm hosting a podcast. So it's a multi-dimensional value, and it literally has changed my life. And so I don't know what you think about all that, Tommy.
Like definitely. The amount of opportunities, like I like to use that example that sometimes you hear those podcast coaching gurus who said, like, like, what is the optimal length of an episode, and like whatever. Like, screw that, right?
Yeah.
And also about the opportunities. I recorded a podcast, I don't remember the number now, but it was about the polar bears. And that was episode with a scientist, a gentleman from Canada, who was studying polar bears for 40 years.
Wow.
He's a top tier in the world expert on the subject of polar bears. He was flying choppers, darting them, making blood. So he was like a hands-on on the ice and in the lab and crunching data on the computer, like 40 years dedicated career to studying polar bears, right?
Amazing.
How otherwise I would have an opportunity to talk to a guy like that?
Yeah,
I couldn't just call him up and said, like, hey, Andrew, do you want to talk with me for an hour about polar bears, right? He would go like, Frank, what do you like? What a weirdo, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that is that opportunity, right? And then I'm going back to this, like a what is the optimal length of a podcast? Like, how would I cut that conversation short to like 45 minutes because someone told me to, right?
No.
I'm just talking with this guy, and okay, like in the editing, you might cut out bits and bobs and so on. It depends how much editing you do in your show. But coming back to the opportunities, like the number of people I met, and then in real life, and the events I was invited, and the scientific conferences I was invited, because all these programs that we were doing, podcast, and they have a conference when they're closing and they're publishing all their papers, so they're inviting me, and then I'm meeting new people, and it's just like you said, it's just like open an entire world of connections, of people, of things that would never happen otherwise.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful. Well, yeah. What about that? What about how have you been able to monetize this passionate project of yours?
Yeah. Do you know what? I don't care about monetization. So like, I'm gonna start with this, right? I don't care about monetization, and this is this thing where, like, what is driving you? What is your goal, right? And this is what I said earlier. Like, it's either a business, and if you say, like, if your goal is like, okay, I want to quit my 9 to 5 and be full-time podcaster, okay, but that's totally different kettle of fish, because you're effectively in the business. You're running business, and you need to have your business plan. You need to fail fast at all those things. If you're driven by passion and you do that because something's in you and you feel like it's a mission, sort of like I'm saying, like, this is like a sort of like a mission for me to talk about those things and communicate with people, then all of a sudden monetization is not that important. Having said that, at some point you start putting a lot of time into what you're doing, a lot of time, and also it like the money starts creeping up on you, because then you you want to have a better hosting platform, and you want to have a better editing software, and you want to have a better recording platform, and it starts to be $20 here, $50 here, and whatever. And at some point, like myself, you wake up and you figure out like, oh, I'm 2,000 euro in the hole year on year, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, it would be nice to recoup some of that thing. Right.
Yeah.
So I give you a tip that for me it was just groundbreaking, right? And it's not my tip, it's a tip that I got from the guy named Adam Shaibley. He's run the podcasting business school, I think is a title, and I got it from him. And at some point, everybody starts getting a lot of those emails from agencies, from PRs. It's like, hey, I have this excellent guest for you, and I have this excellent person who wrote the book or does something and whatever, right? And what Adam said, like, hey, just most of that is irrelevant to you. So, but just said like, hey, my guesting fee is $100. And I thought like, why would I try that? And to the first 4 agencies and so on that emailed me, I said like, okay, yes, sure, no problem. Here's my FAQ document and whatever. For a promotional engagement, I'm charging guesting fee 100 euro. And out of 4 of them, 2 of them said like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I go like, oh, right.
Yeah.
I was like, this money was there on the table all the time.
Right.
All it took is to ask. And that's my biggest tip for the like indie podcasters who for sure are getting a lot of these requests. And that's what you do then. That you just ask for them to pay you. And 50% of them will. This is so obviously you have other things, like you have a donations and you buy me a coffee, you this, you that, something else. But I think, every time someone messages you and say like, oh, I have my client does this or that, right? If they mention client, that means they have a budget.
Right.
If they have a budget, it is just unfair them asking you to do work for free for you. So they say, okay, sure, let me have a piece of that budget.
I like that. I think that's a great perspective. That it's kind of like when people ask you to speak, right? And you're like, yeah, I'll speak at your event, but here's my fee schedule. And they're like, oh, well, you're the only one who asked. And yeah, I do have a budget for you to come and speak to our group.
Exactly. So so on monetization for your indie podcasters out there, like, yeah, it is just unfair to ask you to do the work and not pay you, especially they say, oh, my client, I feel like this is just like they try to like prop themselves up like, oh, they have a client, like, great. And by the way, if the author contacts me and there's like a book that is fit show and like whatever, I'm gonna do this, for free. It's like, right. Yeah, sure, come on over. You wrote the book, you contacted me, you try to promote it, you putting your effort-based marketing yourself.
Right.
Sure, let's do this. Let's, but if it's like, oh, it's my client does this, like, okay, sure.
Right. I like that. What are a couple other things that you'd recommend for somebody in their early stage of their podcast? What kind of a checklist?
Yeah, well, I think that what I noticed is like these days, video makes a difference. Okay, and I am not a huge fanboy of all the move towards video. Although I was doing podcasts in a video format probably for six years out of this 9 that I'm doing it. I was doing that anyway, right? And despite that, I think that the podcast as an audio only medium has huge potential, and it allows people to consume the content and listen to it while they're doing other things, while video is just like a very, very it requires a lot of engagement. Having said that, when a platform puts some new technology, some new idea like Spotify with a video, that makes a difference to jump on that, because they're promoting this, and then they're promoting you with you.
Right.
And I run a little bit of a stats, and I just want to share that with you. So from the moment that Spotify allowed everybody, I'm not hosting with Spotify, but they allowed whatever you're hosting to put a video on, right? And that has its own problems, technical problems that we may not go into here.
Yeah.
But since I started uploading video on Spotify, my number of starts of the Spotify has these things. They have plays and streams, right? So number of plays jumped by 244%.
Wow.
And number of streams jumped by 200%.
That's big.
Okay.
Yeah.
Consumption hours jumped by 335%.
Wow.
Okay. Number of listeners doubled, almost doubled, 98%. And number of followers, 56% rise. Just on Spotify. This is just Spotify numbers. Just by starting uploading video. So do the video on Spotify, right? So that's one tip. You will get on this bandwagon of promoting thing. Other tip that I would give is like social media is overrated, right? Social media is overrated, and for a number of years, I was on like all the social media platforms, including TikTok. Right. And at some point, it's, again, when you're indie podcaster, it is all about optimizing your time and making sure you're spending your time efficiently and on the things that are your return of investment. Right. And I said, like, why it is taking me so long to do all the tweets, all the threads, all the Instagrams, the stories, the reels, the YouTube shorts, the TikToks, what is, like, how much I'm getting back to that. Right. And they're notoriously hard to track. How much of a brand exposure it gives you, and like it is hard to track. But at the same time, I was saying, like, that social media doesn't do me good. And this is like the fundamental problem is, like, when people are on social media, they're scrolling their TikToks, they're this and that, they're there. So if you're promoting, you're like short mechanism, and of course, that, Emmanuel, because you work in the marketing, but for the listeners, right? When you're appealing to people who are scrolling, clicking, you asking them to do something very hard. They need to stop what they're doing now, which is in itself very, addictive.
Yes.
And you want them to stop doing that and then go somewhere else and listen to your podcast.
Yeah.
Not happening. Like, that's not happening. You may get a heart, or you may get like retweet, or you may get something, but that's it. Yeah. Like, if you have a 20, 40 hour long episode and you're appearing on a feed of someone who is there doom scrolling.
Yeah, right.
They're like, there's like, the conversion rate is pathetic. It's just pathetic. And I just basically doing like a one maybe two posts that for every episode now.
Yep.
And guess what happened? Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. Like,
nothing.
My numbers didn't drop. Yeah. Like, I started posting video on the platforms that goes 200%. Right. You stop social media. Social media is goddamn overrated. Now, having said that, if you're only starting, you're on episode 2, then it might get you going.
Yes.
But don't feel like you need to put like effort or just hire VA to tweet for you, twice a day or something. That is wasted money. Social media is overrated. Just focus on a podcasting app on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, which is great for discovery and all that, and focus on that, and focus on the good content. And obviously, like I said, when you're just starting, just make sure you keep going. And that was one reason why I started doing my episode every 2 weeks, not weekly. And I keep going to this day. I'm doing every 2 weeks.
Nice.
And some podcast gurus will tell you like, oh, it should be weekly and whatever.
Right.
Maybe I'm fortnightly.
Yeah.
And that works for me because that gives me comfort. I was reading another blog with a lovely guy, Danny Brown. He's customer service at Captivate. And he wrote a blog about the mental health of podcasters, that they're just getting themselves into this freaking and I feel it. I feel it. I know how it's right, and that the whole pleasure goes away because you feel like you need to grind. Like,
Pressure. Yeah.
yes. So I say, and I felt like every 2 weeks I can do it, and I keep going like this. And this is my recommendation. Like, if you feel like you can do it like a once a month, do it once a month, and keep doing once a month for
Yeah.
years to come.
Right.
If it's like, just make sure this works for you because you're an indie podcaster, and don't let your someone convince you that you now need to be some sort of a businessman, and you need to be the pick the top chart brand. Like, there's like a whole team of people behind those podcasts,
Right. Yeah.
and what they do, it's like not gonna it's not for you. You're in a different category, right?
Yeah.
So that's my thing. Like, don't look up for these big ones because it's sort of irrelevant to what you do.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of like an amateur golfer holding themselves to the same standard as a professional golfer, right? Like, you're just
Exactly.
it's not the same. It's not the same game. Um, where do you fall on the monologue episodes, and how many monologue episodes have you done?
Some I've done some, and even some of them got the feedback like, oh, this is probably the best episode you ever did.
Right.
So there is this again theory that depending on what you want to take out from a podcast. So I guess if you have some side gig, or maybe your main business, and you do the podcast that sort of needs to promote that, then I think that those solo episodes are important because they're giving you this expert positioning, I guess is a term,
Yeah.
rather than just being host, right? So if I have a, let's say, business that I don't know, that there's some sort of a service, right? Let's say building fencing. Let's assume I'm a fencing contractor, right? And I have a podcast about fencing and all things. If I'm only speaking with guests, no matter how great those guests are, there are the experts. I'm not positioning
Always.
myself as an
Right.
expert,
Yeah.
and so I'm not doing what I'm trying to do. So I need to do more of a solo episodes. In my case, I'm not an expert. That's actually part of it, right? That I am
Yeah.
related. That
Yeah.
I can safely ask dumb questions, and sometimes on purpose I'm asking dumb questions to my
Right.
guests. My guests are experts,
Yeah.
and I'm a relatable to my audience and say like, hey, I'm just a hunter and angler, and I'm curious, like, how this thing work,
All right.
and I can ask this naive question, and
Yeah.
that also gives you ability to potentially throw a hard question,
For sure. Yeah.
but you're kind of like hiding behind this naivety, and then you get an expert to right. So that is the thrust of my show. So that works for me. So for me, majority of episodes are guesting episodes rather than solo episodes.
Yeah.
Now, if you do something else, your solo episodes may be more important for you. But again, if someone is just starting, like, man, try that. Try what works for you. Maybe, and what your audience responded to. Like, maybe, it's obviously it's much easier to do solo episodes because although you need to write a script for yourself as well, right? You
Right.
cannot just
Yeah.
sit down and ramble. Some people are gifted and can do it. With guesting episodes, yourself, you need to reach out to people and you need to ask them, and 60% of them will say no, or we say yes but, and that's a slow no.
Yeah.
So it's more work to get to have a guesting episodes. But so that, I don't know if I answer your question, Emmanuel,
Yeah.
but this is
Yeah.
sort of what I'm thinking, how I thinking about it.
I like it. And then on the topic of guests, are there some like high level guests that you'd want to have on your show that you haven't yet?
At this point, probably no. So for the episode 100, I decided to take a moonshot, and I messaged Steven Rinella to come on my show,
Nice.
episode 100, and obviously I got a response like, "Hey, thanks for that, but Steve is too busy right now."
Yeah.
So I was like, "It's okay." But I think like right now, probably I don't go by name, I go by topic.
Uh-huh.
So I like just recently the episode I'm just gonna publish 209. wanted to do an episode for a long time on the impact of beavers on salmon. Right, it's like, hey, if the beavers are building dams, are they impacting salmon that are declining, especially in the UK, Scotland? Very important, because beavers are being now introduced and their population is being restored, but the salmon are declining, and there's this question like, hey, is it a problem? Is it not a problem? I want to do that episode for a long time, and I was struggling. And as it happened, people contacted me. Do you want to do an episode about it? I was like, hey, sure. And they put me in touch with the very scientist I contacted that never got an answer. So I got him in. It's like, and I was like, hey, by the way, do you know that I messaged you like a year ago? And he goes like, yeah, I know. I forgot about it. But I got him in the end, and I got like an expert. So this is who I wanted. I wanted an expert who done an actual research on the topic that I want to cover.
Love it.
So this is how I go about it. And on the subject of these like celebrities, it's often like someone writes a book, right? And let's say some household name in the UK, George Monbiot or like Mark Avery, like someone writes a book, right? And they're doing media tour. And then there is like very likely that they will accept invitation from the smaller shows as well, because they're just doing wholesale everything.
They got to do them all.
Yeah, they're going to do it all. And you know what? I would say don't get them on. It's just waste of time, because that episode will be so boring.
Pitch. Buy my book.
Well, that's one thing. But then they talk in the same thing, right? They already appeared on 10 podcasts.
Right.
And likelihood is that 8 of those 10 podcasts are actually better than yours. They're better interviewers. If you just started, right? They're better interviewers. Nobody will listen again, the same person talking about the same thing, only on a smaller show.
Right.
It is unlikely to happen. So in my view, that's a recipe for boring episode and a waste of time. So you rather find like what you do and just pursue relentlessly what you do, rather than like, oh, I want this household name. Like nobody cares, right? And then there's another thing. Like if you're getting a let's say other podcaster on your show, right? They're there to get your audience to their show. This is not like you're advertising. You like remember, and this is kind of like it ties nicely back to that thing like ask for money.
Yeah.
Because that's you who's putting the work and it's you who's doing the job. It's like it very seldom works other way around, that someone comes on your show and that will boost your show.
Right.
That happens very seldom. It's usually other way around. Someone goes on the show and that boosts him, right?
Yeah.
So that's a pro tip right now. Go on other podcasts and you show up on other bigger podcasts.
Right.
And talk about what you got to talk to about, rather than praying that someone will go to your show and bless you with their presence. Right? That's not happening usually.
Well, what are some of the services you use to find podcasts and to find guests?
Yeah, so I do I do a lot of my own research on topic. So I spend substantial time on the research, like what is the topic that my audience is interested in, and as well what I'm interested in.
Yep.
And then like in the example of salmon and beaver is like, okay, who actually done the research in Scotland or in the UK, and then you have a list of scientists, and then you message them, and you take it from there. So that's a one of the guesting strategy. Also, like I mentioned, there is a I don't want to say a lot, but maybe like 20-30% of guests are people who are coming to me and say like, hey, we do this or we do that, and then some of them are paid appearances, and there's always the footnote that the guest in this podcast paid standard guesting fee to appear on the podcast. I always disclose that, and I think it's just a courtesy, and it is just a nice thing to do. Other than in some jurisdictions, you have to do it by law.
Uh-huh.
So that's also a lot of listeners are messaging me and like, have you heard about that? And
Oh,
like,
nice.
oh, there's this thing, and there's this guy who does this thing, right? And I go in, I look what people send me, and then I'm finding like, oh, here's this filmmaker or scientist who just like a kick-ass job. That would be interesting to talk to him.
Yeah.
And I message him, and I get that thing. And then the other thing, like what I said about the slow no, like I think that the record on my podcast is like, I was trying to get a podcast with a guy for 2 years, and it was always something. It was like
Yeah.
he couldn't, and he didn't respond, and then he didn't message, and like after 2 years, he finally showed up on the show. And I was like, hey, great, like, and so be ready for, so have a system of sort of tracking, like or almost like a CRM.
Yeah.
Of tracking these people. It's like, well, that guy, like, I really I would like to, and if they say no, fine, keep going, contact them in 6 months time, contact them a year later. Hey, you remember me? I was just because something else may be happening in their life. They may have a new research published, they may have book coming up, they may have changed the institution they're working on, or something, and they're going to be more receptive. So never get discouraged when someone say no. Try again. If they say no, they don't want to, like, that's fine too.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Wrapping up here. What's next? What's the next phase of Tommy's Outdoors and the science and conservation?
Yeah, I might give you a scoop a little bit, Emmanuel. Here, I'm looking at starting a new podcast that's gonna be very much focused hardcore on published science.
Oh, nice.
And that is there's going to be a little bit of a cross promotion between what I do in conservation and science and the other one, but the focus will be on the young scientists and their research, and sort of it's going to be also like on one end helping young scientists to find out what is happening in their field and what other scientists are doing.
Wow.
And at the same time provide a platform for these scientists to share their research and also get a little bit more proficient in science communication, because often they go on the conferences and they're hiding behind a PowerPoint. And they have like a PowerPoint with 25 bullet points and 4 graphs, and it's just a car crash. So on the podcast, it's going to be, hey, do you have no PowerPoint here? Like you need to communicate your research in a way to other people, right? So that's the idea. Like I mentioned on top of the show, I just moved to the new studio, so it's going to be a little bit of work around that. But that's what I'm intending to do. As far as conservation and science, look, I'm having such an immense fun doing it that I don't have like a next big thing that I'm going to be doing. Of course, I'm experimenting all the time. I'm changing. I'm doing little tweaks. Like when you're doing that close to 10 years, you sort of you find your formula, you find your format that works. So I'm doing like a sort of like a little tweaks, like with the intros, with the maybe how I'm starting the podcast, how I'm starting with a hook maybe a little bit differently, and like a little incremental changes. So this is what I'm doing with conservation and science. I'm quite happy with what it is. I'm, like I said, I'm having immense fun, and I'm really happy where it is. But this new podcast, subscribe to my conservation science podcast. You will hear me cross promoting my new podcast when it's up.
All right. Well, I love it. I wish you the best of luck with the new one. It sounds interesting to have a show where scientists can release their information and have conversations and be humanized a little bit more. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Well, Tommy, I'm really grateful for the time you spent with me. Thank you so much. And
my pleasure.
It's amazing to get a download from you after 10 years of experience of generating content like this. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Emmanuel, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And hang on while I close the show out and we'll say goodbye again. All right. Well, there you got Tommy Serafinski, and a lot of great takeaways for new and existing podcasts. Follow your passion, follow guests that you want to have on the show, and then when you get that outreach from the guesting agencies, get a little bit of cash flow from them in order to help you continue to test and develop new products and find some software maybe that will help you speed up your internal processes. I hope this has been a valuable show for you today, and please drop what you're doing and get a podcast started, or take some time and innovate the one that you have. Emmanuel Rose, behind the podcast mic.
Thanks for joining us on Behind the Podcast Mic. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone else who's thinking about starting or leveling up their podcast. This show is sponsored by Fluent Frame, your creative partner in building a podcasting system that works. From professional production to strategic distribution, Fluent Frame helps turn your voice into a scalable content engine that drives visibility, trust, and growth. Ready to launch or improve your podcast? Visit influentframe.com to learn how they can help bring your vision to life. Until next time, keep creating, keep connecting, and keep stepping up to the mic.